Hey, it's Prepper Action, and this is the Journey Part 1. This is the audio commentary. This scene here was filmed coming back from LA, where there's a brush fire, and then the next scene cuts straight to the checkpoint at near San Onofre nuclear power plant, and they were waving us through. And as I came through here, I accelerated, and my dash cam fell off the dash and landed into the cup holder, and it kind of made an interesting scene in retrospect when I looked at it, so I figured I would use that in the film. At this point, I really didn't have a storyboard fleshed out, so I was just kind of jumping around through ideas and filming some things, see what would springboard off into a different direction. So I went with that, and that's basically the opening scene. Now here the character, his name is Gordon, and I used to play this video game. You might have heard about it, Half-Life 2. It was quite popular a few years ago, some years ago actually. So I named the character Gordon. That's a really great video game, very interactive, so I needed a character name, and although he doesn't have dialogue in any of these three films, Part 3 is a little different, but Part 1 and 2 there's no talking. I basically try to tell the story through the character in either third person or first person perspective, and multiple camera angles. I try to tell the story through the camera lens and the character. And the first part of this character is just coming to a scene that I found while filming. I was scouting areas, and I found this pretty interesting, and I went with the narrative that I was going with on this film. In this parking lot, almost every van has the hood up, and it kind of told the story conveniently that, you know, there could have been a massive solar flare that took out all these vehicles and nothing's really running. Also, I try to use a forced perspective and kind of lead the viewer into the scene, depending on whether the character Gordon is either coming in or coming out of a scene. Like right here, you see very forced perspective lines converging. And this is an interesting scene. It's by the Cox Cable, and they have all these satellites, just half a dozen satellites that are immense, pretty huge. So I thought it would be an interesting scene to add into this film. Here you see the character just walking. Nobody's around. There's no cars. The hardest part of filming this was waiting for cars to pass to give that scene a look that there's nobody around. Like, it's kind of, in a way, I wanted to make it similar or reminiscent of I Am Legend, which is a great film, one of my favorites, one of my favorite dystopian films. Here you're kind of wondering what the character Gordon is doing with this 9-inch nail or 6-inch nail and some paracord. Also, you see the tripod in the very lower end, but shh, don't tell anybody. This is the first scene that kind of kicks off what I'm doing here, and I remember reading about, I think it's in Wesley Rawls' novels that he does, that the characters were moving underground through sewage and water drainage areas, which isn't a bad way to move depending on the situation. This is kind of an iconic scene in this film where you see the character emerge from this drain tunnel out of the darkness. I try to film with a lot, like I said, converging lines and forced perspective. Also, I like to work with stark contrasts. Now here in this scene, you see the character kind of, you know, looking around skittishly, nervous, isn't sure about his surroundings. He's just been thrust into this semi-post-apocalyptic world. Some of these scenes I just filmed that looked interesting. This tunnel full of spiders was just made me itch the rest of the day. And just a few like desolate areas. In this floodway, this cat I didn't realize was nursing a kitten. until I reviewed the footage on a larger screen. But she wanted nothing to do with me, and probably would have grabbed that little kit and then take off with it. Still looking around, kind of wondering what he should do here. This first part of the journey, part one, is, in retrospect, is really basic, but it does serve to get the viewer into the series. I try to use a lot of mood music, first and third person perspective. Some scenes are kind of, I stumble across and I'll just film it. Here's one of the first scenes where he's going to do a kind of a survival hack. If you don't have a can opener, this is what you can do. Obviously he's forgotten where he has his P38, or he doesn't have it in his bag. There is a significant character development between this film, part one, and part two, and part three it really comes up. But rubbing here on that smooth wall is going to take forever, so it's really not working on this, and I wanted to try and convey that in the film. Seeing the edges, not really a lot of stuff going on there to sand down the crimp on that can. So you go to a rougher surface. It does take a little time, and on certain surfaces you're going to kick up some dust, and this cement dust in this floodway might not be very healthy to breathe, depending on what kind of mold might have gone into the cement and washed down. Here you can see some moisture coming out of the can, and there was one scene where it was kind of filmed out of order, so you'll see it right there. There's no moisture on the ground. And this happens in Hollywood all the time. You'll catch a scene where it's a slight inconsistency. But I do point it out here. There's a couple in these films, and it's mostly a costume change faux pas with maybe he's wearing the fingerless gloves in one scene, and then the next scene maybe he's not. But it's really hard to coordinate everything, being that I'm also doing the storyboarding, the camera angles, obviously the acting, the changing of scenes and camera angles. You kind of can forget that, oh yeah, I should have this in the scene. I guess that's why there's a support crew, but doing this all by myself was really kind of a journey for me as a filmmaker. I learned a lot by part three of this episode or this series. So this is the audio commentary for part one. I hope you enjoyed. I might add a little bonus scene here at the end. There was some footage that I filmed in the very beginning of the concept, and I just ended up not using it. But the footage is really stunning looking, so I may use it in a fourth series or fifth series. I am loosely storyboarding a fourth episode for the journey, and it may be done by the end of 2016, by winter time, perhaps. Oh, here he also forgot that he doesn't have a spoon. And you can use the lid, as long as there's no sharp edges. Just kind of give it a fold like a taco, and you can use it as a scoop. But this film really evolves in part two and part three. Even the coloring and the scenery does change a little bit in part 2 and 3. It's a little more muted, a little more desaturated with the color tones, but it still looks pretty fantastic. So to be continued, stay tuned. Watch part 1, part 2 without the audio commentary. I might add to all these films the audio commentary, because it'll really kind of give you a behind the scenes of what I was thinking while doing these series. So that being said, prepper action out, and be safe. Cut.